It was one of those days when the road feels like your second home. The hum of the tires, the endless horizon stretching ahead. I'm Luke Harper, a long-haul trucker, and I've seen a lot of things on the road over the years. You get used to weird stuff. Vehicles acting strangely, lights flickering, people waving you down. But nothing could have prepared me for the night I ended up on US 95, outside of Reno. It started innocently enough. I was hauling a load of auto parts from LA to Salt Lake City. It was late September, the air still warm, and the sky painted in deep orange hues as the sun dipped behind the mountains. I'd been driving for hours, my eyes glued to the road, my mind drifting in that trance-like state you get after too much coffee and too many miles. Around 10 p.m., I passed through a stretch of road between small towns, just open desert on both sides. Nothing but the steady hum of the engine and the low glow of my headlights. That's when I saw them. At first, it was just a figure standing by the side of the road, just a silhouette against the dark. No lights, no flashers, nothing. I figured they were just a hitchhiker or someone with car trouble, but there was something off. They were just standing there, staring at my truck, unmoving. I made the mistake of slowing down. I leaned forward, squinting into the headlights, trying to make out who it was. As I got closer, I realized there were more of them. 2 more figures appeared out of the darkness, emerging from the shadows behind the first. And they were moving fast, like they'd been waiting. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt wrong. I couldn't see their faces, just shadows and the faint outline of figures in dark clothes. They weren't waving me down or signaling for help. They were just standing there, blocking the road. I hit the horn, one long blast, and they didn't even flinch. That's when my gut told me this was no random hitchhiker situation. Something was about to go down. I didn't know what I was up against, but I wasn't about to get caught off guard. I swerved the rig, aiming to bypass them. That's when the first one stepped forward, lifting their arm. It was like they were signaling something, but the movement was too deliberate, too coordinated to be a random pedestrian. As I tried to maneuver, I saw another figure on the other side of the road, a man in a truck revving his engine. My heart raced. There was a setup happening, no doubt about it. They were herding me into something. Maybe they wanted my load. Maybe they just wanted to mess with me. I slammed on the gas, my engine roaring to life, pushing the truck faster. In my rear view, I saw the figure in the truck behind me give chase, matching my speed. I was already doing 75 miles per hour, and he was right on my tail. I glanced at the mirrors, 3 others now on the road, closing in from both sides. This wasn't just some lone incident. This was organized. Adrenaline hit me like a freight train. My mind raced through options. Should I pull over? Try to outrun them? But the road was too isolated, too empty. There was nowhere to turn off. If I stopped, I was done for. I switched on my high beams and took a sharp turn to the right, hoping to throw them off. The truck behind me swerved, and I could see the headlights flashing as he struggled to stay behind me. The figures by the side of the road began to move toward the truck, closing the gap. At that moment, I knew I was being trapped. The truck ahead of me? It wasn't just a random trucker, it was a decoy. And the ones on foot? They were part of a bigger operation, probably thieves, maybe even worse. I had to think fast, or I was going to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the dry desert and a bunch of dangerous strangers. I floored the pedal and zigzagged across the road, trying to confuse them. I needed space, time, anything. The truck behind me kept pressing. I could hear the tires squealing as it tried to stay with me. The figures were right behind me now, gaining ground. Then, I saw a sign. A turnoff up ahead. A gravel road. My heart pounded. I knew it was my only shot. If I could make that turn, I could break free. I swerved hard to the left, sending the truck screeching onto the gravel. The truck behind me was too close. I braced myself as I hit the turn, narrowly missing the cliff's edge. I heard the truck behind me slam its brakes, skidding off the gravel, but by then, I was already accelerating, heading down the small, winding road. The headlights of the truck receded into the distance. I didn't stop until I reached a small, run-down town 30 miles down the road. I pulled into a gas station, heart still racing, and checked my rearview mirror over and over. No sign of them. I refueled and decided to call it a night. But the entire experience was eating at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on out there. This wasn't just some random encounter. I'd been part of something planned, something carefully orchestrated. A message? A warning? I'll never know. What I did know was that I wasn't about to let my guard down ever again. This world of endless highways and desolate roads, it's full of predators. And sometimes, the worst dangers aren't the ones you can see. They're the ones who stay hidden, waiting for you to make the wrong move. I've been driving trucks for years, but the night I'll never forget happened on Route 66, near a stretch that runs through New Mexico. It wasn't the usual scary moments you get on the road, drunk drivers, bad weather, or long stretches of nothing. No, this one was different. It was the kind of moment that leaves you questioning everything. My name's Kyle Thompson, and I've been hauling freight across the country for the last 15 years. I've seen it all. Cops pulling people over, busted down rigs, even a few crazy highway chases. But this one took me to a place I didn't know existed. It started on a warm autumn evening. The sun was just setting, casting that beautiful golden light over the desert. I was hauling a load of electronics from Los Angeles to Chicago, cruising along the historic Route 66, heading toward Albuquerque. The road was empty, typical for that stretch, and the quiet was almost soothing. The only sounds were the hum of the tires and the occasional rattle of the truck. I was about 30 miles outside Albuquerque when I first saw it. A car, stranded on the side of the road. The hazard lights were flashing, but the car was facing the wrong way, the back end slightly off the pavement. It wasn't unusual to see a stranded vehicle out here, but something felt off. There was no one around the car, no signs of anyone walking or trying to flag down help. Just the car, sitting still, lights flashing like a warning. I slowed down as I approached. Usually I'd just keep going. I'm not a sucker for helping stranded people, not on those empty roads. But something made me stop this time. Maybe it was the angle of the car, or maybe it was the fact that the whole place was so still. No other cars, nothing. I pulled over about 50 yards in front of the car and turned on my hazards. Before I could get out, I saw a figure moving near the car, stumbling toward me. A man. His clothes were torn, his face pale, like he hadn't eaten or slept in days. He was walking unsteadily, almost dragging his feet. "Hey, you okay?" I called out through the open window. He stopped a few feet from the truck and looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Please, I need help. My car broke down. I've been stranded for hours. Can you give me a ride?" His voice was shaky, his breath heavy, like he'd been running. Something wasn't right about him, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He didn't look like your typical stranded driver. His movements were too erratic, like he was nervous about something more than just a broken car. I shook my head, half out of instinct. "I can't take you, man. I've got a long haul ahead of me." I tried to sound firm, but my eyes kept glancing at his car. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the door handle. "Please, just a ride to the next town. I won't take much of your time." I locked the door and my heart started to pound a little faster. "Sorry, man. You'll have to wait for a tow truck." But he wasn't backing off. He kept coming closer, like he was desperate. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't help you. Go back to your car." But he just stood there, staring at me, his eyes pleading but filled with something darker. Then, without warning, he slammed his hand against the door, hard enough that I felt it rattle. "I need to get out of here," he shouted. I jumped back, my blood running cold. There was a pause, just silence, but it felt like the world had gone completely still. That's when I saw it. Another figure appeared behind him, moving out of the darkness from the other side of the car. Another person, taller, bigger, a woman. She was moving slowly, almost casually, but her eyes were fixed on me. The man at my door looked back, his face turning from desperation to something darker. "You don't understand, do you? You're not going anywhere." Before I could react, the woman pulled out a crowbar, her grip firm, her stance ready. The man turned to her, giving me a sharp, cruel smile. "You thought you could just drive by, didn't you? No one's driving anywhere tonight." My mind raced. The air in the truck cab felt thick. I knew I had to act fast. There was no telling how many more of them were out there. This wasn't just a couple of stranded travelers. They were setting up a trap. They were waiting for the right victim. I threw the truck into reverse, tearing away from them, the tires screaming as I backed up onto the shoulder. The woman raised the crowbar, but I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, sending my rig surging forward, the engine roaring to life. The truck behind me, the one I hadn't noticed earlier, came into view. It was parked off to the side, its headlights dimmed, but it was blocking my path. I had nowhere to go. Panic started to claw at me as I swerved the truck to the left, trying to avoid the obstacle. The figures didn't chase me. Instead, they just stood there, watching, like they knew I was already trapped. My heart was racing. I drove faster than I ever had, ignoring the tight corners, the bumps in the road. I needed to get to a town, to get to safety, but every mile felt like a countdown. The man's face haunted my mirrors. I could feel his eyes on me, even as I sped away. It wasn't until I hit the outskirts of Albuquerque that I finally saw a truck stop and pulled in, heart still pounding in my chest. I barely had time to gather myself before I jumped out and told the clerk what had happened. The police arrived quickly. They found the abandoned car, but there was no sign of the man or the woman. They searched the area for hours, but nothing turned up. The police couldn't find any record of the car either. No license plate, no trace of it ever being reported. The whole thing was gone. I never found out who they were or what their plan was. But after that night, I'm never too sure who I'm helping when I stop for someone on the side of the road. You just don't know when you might be driving straight into a trap. The worst part? I can still hear that man's voice in my head. "You're not going anywhere tonight." It doesn't matter how far I've driven. I'll never forget that night. And if you're out there driving, be careful. Because sometimes the danger doesn't look like danger until it's too late. Every trucker has that one stretch of road that gives them a bad feeling. For me, it's the I-10, a highway that cuts through Texas like a scar. The road is long, lonely, and unyielding, especially at night when the darkness feels like it's swallowing you whole. But there's one part of that highway that I'll never forget. It was a cold night in early December when I made my run from Houston to Phoenix. I'm Eddie Walker, a trucker who's been on the road for over 20 years. I've driven through the worst weather, survived mechanical failures, and dealt with just about every kind of driver you can imagine. But nothing prepared me for the strange events that took place on Interstate 10 that night. It started off like any other haul. I was heading west, about 300 miles into my trip. The miles rolled by, the clock ticking, and the endless road ahead felt like my only companion. I've always liked the solitude. It gives me time to think. But as I crossed into the desolate stretch near Fort Stockton, the feeling changed. The usual silence felt oppressive, like something was waiting for me. At first I thought it was just the tiredness setting in, but then I saw it. A figure, a silhouette, standing on the shoulder of the highway, just past mile marker 263. At first I thought it was a mirage, one of those tricks the headlights play on you in the dark. But no. The figure was standing there, clearly visible now that I was getting closer. I slowed the truck down, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a man, tall, dressed in a dark coat, his back to me. He was standing perfectly still, not waving for help, not walking, just standing there, motionless, like he was waiting. My heart rate picked up. It's late. There's nothing around here. No town, no gas station, just open desert for miles. I've been down this road plenty of times and never seen anyone stranded out here. I eased my truck to the shoulder, coming to a stop just past the figure. I rolled down the window, trying to get a better look at him. His face was hidden in the shadow of his hood, but I could see his posture was stiff, almost unnatural. "Hey, you need help?" I called out. There was no answer. I called out again, but still nothing. At this point, every alarm bell in my head was ringing. I shouldn't have stopped. I shouldn't have engaged. But something kept me there. Something pulled me in, and I couldn't look away. I rolled the window up just a bit and started to drive away, the feeling of unease growing stronger. As I passed him, I stole a glance into my side mirror. That's when I saw it. The figure wasn't still anymore. It was following me, moving, but at a speed I couldn't even process. It wasn't running, wasn't walking. It was gliding, like it was floating, gaining on me faster than it should have been. I slammed my foot down on the gas, the truck roaring to life, tires screeching on the asphalt. My pulse raced. I looked back at the mirror again, and for a brief moment, I saw it, just a shadow darting in and out of the headlights, faster and faster. That's when I realized what was happening. I wasn't alone on that highway. I never had been. The figure wasn't just chasing me, it was everywhere. As I drove faster, I kept seeing flashes of movement around me, just outside my line of sight. Shapes, shadows, darting between the darkness and the truck's headlights. At first I thought I was imagining it, too tired, too rattled. But it kept happening. I started to feel like I was being hunted. It was like every time I looked away, the figures were closer. I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the rearview mirror, shadows moving too quickly to be real. Every time I turned my head, I'd see the figure in a different spot, in front of the truck, beside it, then back in the rear view. I drove faster, too fast. The truck's engine roared as I pushed it past 80 miles per hour, but it didn't matter. The figures kept pace, always just out of my direct sight, closing in, always just on the edge of my vision. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. I pulled into a rest stop near the Pecos River, my hands still shaking on the wheel. I parked the truck, looking around in the stillness. The only sound was the distant hum of the highway. The figures were gone. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm my racing heart, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just imagining it. I couldn't let it go. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I kept my eyes on the mirrors, making sure I wasn't being followed again, but nothing happened. The road was silent. The next day, I checked my dash cam footage, hoping to make sense of it. There was nothing, no figure, no shadow, just the dark road and my truck moving down the highway. But I know what I saw. I felt it, deep in my bones. Something is out there on I-10, and sometimes it's not just the road that's endless, it's the things that follow you down it. It was a cold, clear night when I made my way through the Nevada desert. I'm Jason Matthews, a trucker who's spent most of his life hauling freight up and down the West Coast. I've seen my fair share of strange encounters, accidents, weird detours, things that don't make sense. But nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for the strange events that happened on that stretch of road. I was heading north, approaching the junction near Tonopah, where I-95 and US 6 meet. It was around 2 a.m., and the road was as empty as you could get. There's nothing out there but miles of barren land and the occasional dim light from a distant ranch. The air was sharp, dry, and it was the kind of silence that wraps around you, heavy and thick, making you feel small. I had been driving for hours, and my eyes were starting to get heavy. The only sound in the cab was the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. I was looking for a place to pull over and grab some sleep when I noticed something strange, a flashing light up ahead. I squinted, thinking it might be a construction zone or another stranded vehicle, but there was no sign of any barricades or warning signs. Just a single flashing light, bouncing around erratically, like someone was signaling for help. My first instinct was to ignore it, to keep driving, but for some reason I slowed down. I don't know why. I guess I felt like I had to check it out. As I got closer, the light grew brighter and more erratic. It didn't make sense. There was nothing out here. No towns, no exits, just empty highway. Then, just as I was about to pass it, I saw the figure. It was a man, standing in the middle of the road, bathed in the strange glow of the flashing light. His clothes were torn, and his face was hidden under the brim of a dark hat. He didn't move, didn't react to the truck coming toward him. He just stood there, staring at me, motionless. I slammed on the brakes, barely managing to stop in time. My heart was racing. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his presence standing there in the middle of nowhere was unsettling. Something in my gut told me that this wasn't a normal hitchhiker situation. The guy didn't look like he needed help. He looked like he was waiting for something, or someone. I leaned out the window and called out to him. "Hey, you all right?" No answer. Just the eerie silence, broken only by the distant hum of my truck's engine. I got out of the cab, cautiously approaching him. As I stepped closer, the light seemed to flicker in an unnatural pattern, casting strange shadows over the road. The man still didn't move. His stance was rigid, like he was frozen in place. "Hello?" I tried again, my voice shaking a little. Still nothing. I was starting to get a bad feeling about this. I took another step forward and then noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were no tire tracks, no footprints in the dirt where he was standing. The road around him was undisturbed, like no one had been there for hours. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. I reached for my phone, thinking I should call someone, maybe the police, or just get some advice. But before I could dial, I heard a faint sound, like a whisper coming from behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. I stepped back, my instincts screaming at me to leave. But as I turned to get back in the truck, I saw something else. a figure standing by the side of the road, just beyond the reach of my headlights. It was another man, this one dressed in a similar dark coat, with a face that I could barely make out in the dim light. I couldn't move. My body was frozen. The two figures, now there were two, just stood there watching me. The first man still hadn't moved, but the second man started walking toward me, his steps slow but deliberate. I didn't wait to see any more. I bolted for the truck, jumped into the cab, and threw it in gear. My heart was pounding as I peeled out of there, the truck's tires skidding on the asphalt. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I didn't stop until I hit the next town, more than 50 miles away. I pulled into a gas station, still shaking, and locked the doors behind me. I didn't tell anyone about what happened. Didn't even mention it to the clerk at the station. I didn't know what I had seen, and I didn't want to know. For days after, I couldn't shake the feeling that those figures were still out there, somewhere. Watching, waiting. I kept thinking about the way the man had stood in the road, completely still, and how there were no signs of any vehicle being there. The weirdest part? I've been back on that road since then, more times than I can count. And every single time I pass that stretch near Tonopah, I slow down, just a little, half expecting to see those same figures again. But I never do. They're always gone by the time I look. I don't know what they were. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Or maybe there's something out there, something that only shows itself when you're alone, when you're too far from anyone who can help. But I'll tell you this. Every time I drive through that part of Nevada, I keep my eyes on the road, and I never stop. I'm Derek Larson, a trucker who spent years on the road, hauling everything from heavy equipment to fresh produce. You get used to the isolation out here, the endless hours of pavement stretching ahead. But every now and then, something happens that makes you question whether the road is as empty as it seems. That's what happened to me one summer night, somewhere between Flagstaff and the Arizona border. It started innocently enough. The usual grind, driving long stretches in the heat, dodging the occasional rainstorm, just trying to get my load to its destination. It was late at night, around 1 a.m., and the only sounds were the hum of the truck's engine and the occasional snap of the tires over the asphalt. The highway was practically empty, a few cars here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was just a mirage, something my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, there she was, standing on the side of the road, just past a curve. A woman, young, wearing a long coat despite the heat. Her hand was raised, signaling for a ride. Now I know better than to pick up hitchhikers. It's a rule every trucker learns early on. You don't know who you're picking up, and out here in the middle of nowhere it can be dangerous. But something about her made me slow down. She looked off. Her hair was wild, tangled, and she had this look in her eyes, like she was lost in the middle of nowhere, just like me. I pulled over, keeping the engine running, the doors locked. "You need a ride?" I asked, sticking my head out the window. Her gaze was steady, not frantic. She didn't seem scared, but there was something strange about her presence. "I'm headed to the next town," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was a sadness in it. "Please, can you help me?" I hesitated. The road was empty, and I was tired, but she wasn't giving me any reason to feel uneasy, at least not yet. I nodded, reaching over to unlock the passenger door. "Get in." She climbed into the truck with an almost eerie calmness, her coat trailing behind her as she sat down. I glanced over at her, trying to make conversation. "Where are you headed?" She looked straight ahead, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I'm just trying to get home." I didn't press her for more details. The road was dark, and the silence between us felt natural, until it didn't. After a few minutes, I started to notice something strange. Every few seconds, I'd glance at her in the rearview mirror, but when I turned my head to look at her directly, she would be staring at me. Not just a casual glance, but staring at me, like she knew something I didn't. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the stress of driving so late at night. But the feeling kept creeping up on me. It was like I wasn't alone in that cab anymore, like there was something else there with us. The silence grew heavier, and I felt myself growing more uneasy with every passing mile. My hand hovered over the wheel, my nerves tightening. I glanced at her again in the mirror, and this time I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. Her eyes were different, almost black, like she wasn't even fully human. The skin around her eyes was too pale, too smooth. For a brief second, I thought I saw a flicker of something unnatural, something that wasn't right. I forced myself to focus on the road, trying to keep my composure. But then, out of nowhere, the truck's lights flickered. Once, twice. And then the engine sputtered, the truck jerking as if it were losing power. My heart dropped into my stomach. This couldn't be happening. This truck had been running fine for miles. I glanced over at her, and she was looking out the window as if nothing was wrong. But the air in the cab felt heavier, thicker, like the atmosphere had changed somehow. It was suffocating. I reached for the radio, trying to call out for help, but there was nothing, just static. My hands were shaking now, sweat dripping down the back of my neck. I knew I had to pull over and check the engine, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I didn't know what was out there in the dark, and the thought of stopping made me feel like I was walking straight into a trap. I tried to accelerate, but the truck sputtered again, this time coming to a complete stop. The woman didn't react. She didn't even seem aware of the problem. I hit the steering wheel in frustration, cursing under my breath. "What the hell is going on?" I muttered. Then I heard it, soft, almost like a whisper at first, but getting louder. A voice coming from the back of the cab. "Help me." I froze, my blood running cold. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The woman was still sitting quietly beside me, staring straight ahead. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't respond. She just kept staring at the road, her hands still folded in her lap. Suddenly, the truck jerked back to life, the engine roaring to life as if nothing had happened. The lights flickered one last time and then stabilized, but when I looked over at her, the woman was gone. I blinked, looking around, but she was nowhere to be found. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I quickly checked the doors to make sure they were still locked. The truck was empty. There was no sign of her anywhere. I didn't even slow down as I drove to the nearest rest stop. I didn't stop until I was in a well-lit area with other trucks parked around. I pulled in, locked up, and sat there for what felt like hours, staring out into the night, unable to shake the image of the woman's face. I still don't know what happened that night, but I know one thing for sure. I will never pick up another hitchhiker again. That experience changed me. I don't care how alone I am out there. There's a darkness that can show up when you least expect it, and sometimes it follows you. The worst part? When I checked the GPS to make sure I wasn't completely off track, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The road I had been on had no exits for miles, and there were no signs of any towns or rest stops along that stretch of highway. It was like she had never existed at all. And there you have it. 5 terrifying stories from the road, each one a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous things aren't what you can see, but what's lurking just beyond the headlights. If you've ever experienced something that made your heart race or left you questioning reality, drop a comment below and share your story. Let's keep this community alive and keep each other safe out there. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a new tale from the dark corners of the highway. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and never stop looking over your shoulder.